I am making sourdough today, so I wanted to give you a full behind the scenes look at my timeline from an early morning feeding to an early evening bake and the full timeline of everything in between. Luckily, sourdough is really hands off. There's not a lot you need to do besides a few folds and let it rest, but I think there will be a lot of helpful tips if you want to make sourdough bread at home. So hopefully you find it useful, and I can't wait to see your bakes. This is not my typical video. There's going to be a lot of different angles, different lighting throughout the day, but it is the most authentic look at how I make sourdough, which I do about 2 to 3 times a week. So hopefully you enjoy, and if you do, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and follow along. 5:43 a.m. I knew I was making sourdough today, so I fed my starter last night and left it out at room temperature. This morning, I took 75 grams of the sourdough starter, 75 grams of filtered water, and then 75 grams of flour. I tried to be as accurate as possible, so it took me a little while to get exactly to 225 grams. Then I gave it all a mix, making sure to incorporate even the starter at the bottom of the jar. Here's how it looks, a thick paste, but then I'll push it back down so that I get an accurate read on exactly where the starter was. I'll put the yellow band there so I know when it has doubled in size. For me, with this active sourdough starter, it took until 8:29 p.m. and here's how it looked. More than doubled in size, bubbling, and ready to use. I added to a bowl 150 grams of that active sourdough starter, 300 grams of filtered water, and gave everything a good stir. It's important that this is incorporated before you add your flour, so mix it together well and then add in your bread flour. I often start mixing with a rubber spatula, but then we'll switch to a latex glove just so I can really get in there and I don't have messy, sticky fingers. But what you don't want is any flour to be exposed so that it creates like dry lumps of flour. That's the last thing you want. So make sure it's hydrated, mixed well, and cover it for an hour. After an hour, here's how it looks. I add half of my salt, give it a few folds, and then I'll add the remaining salt and repeat the folds. Now cover and let rest for about an hour. At that time, I pour the dough onto a floured surface and gently flatten the dough. If it sticks to the bowl, it's totally normal. We're going to clean the bowl after this. Now, flatten it out gently. Roll it one direction and then flip and roll the other direction. Now we're going to shape it back into a ball and put back into our bowl, and you guessed it, cover it and let it rest for an hour. Now I'm going to repeat that for a second time, repeating the same process. Folding, flipping, folding, shaping into a ball, covering in a clean bowl, and letting it rest for another hour. Our third and final time, the same exact thing, but this time we want to be a little more gentle so that none of the gas that is in the dough escapes. So gently working with the dough, rolling, flipping, and rolling again. Since this is going into our bulk rise, what I like to do is just seal the edges a little bit more, using some friction against the countertop to seal those edges and make sure that it's a seamless ball of dough. Clean up your work surface, cover, and this time we're going to let it rest for 5 hours during our bulk rise. At this time, what I like to do is preheat my oven, convection bake if you have it, 500 degrees, and dust a basket with rice flour. Again, working very gently, get the dough out of the bowl, and this time we're just going to shape it. Using the tension of the countertop to press it against it and shape into a ball of dough with the seam on the bottom. Now we're going to put that into a proofing basket and let rise for 1 hour while our oven preheats. Now, get a piece of parchment paper, invert the dough, and then we're going to transfer that to a Dutch oven. And just before putting in the oven, I am going to score the loaf. You can either do it with a sharp knife, make a decorative pattern, or you can choose to not do it at all. But that way you don't have as much control over where the gas and steam escapes. Bake at 500 degrees for 20 minutes, then remove the lid and bake at 450 degrees for about 35 minutes. Let cool completely before slicing into it. Enjoy your sourdough bread.